understand English? Okay, thank you. So, my name is Jane. Some know me very well. In fact, my brother and sister are here. My other sister's over there. And I'm the crazy girl who thought of doing this global yoga fundraiser event to help the dogs victims of the meat trade in Asia. And I will say it's dogs and cats. It's not just dogs, but it's mostly dogs. And so why I started doing this is I had the idea about 3 years ago, before the pandemic, because I'm a yogi. I've been practicing yoga for about 15 years. And Jeanne Mudie, who's the owner of this beautiful studio, Ashtanga Yoga Montreal, has been gracious enough to open her space to this cause. I told her a little bit my idea. Sounds a little bit crazy because it's a novel concept in terms of fundraisers, but she went along with it and I'm so grateful. Thank you, Jeanne. And I used to practice at this studio when I used to live in Montreal, so it's got a very special place in my heart. And I don't know if you can feel it, but when you walk in this room, I feel immediately calm and peace. And that's what I want to send out in the world, because these dogs really need more peace and love. And we can make a change happen. And the idea behind the fundraiser is that I wanted to inform a group of people that for the most part are probably not aware of this issue called the dog-cat meat trade. Yoga practitioners, often they are not aware. I've spoken to many and they were just completely unaware of such an issue. And I felt like yoga is a practice of cultivating peace and, calm and peace and love. And if they would learn about this issue, that they would probably want to support the beautiful Chinese rescuers that we're featuring on the Yoga Stops Yulin website. That's what I baptized this whole thing. Global Yoga fundraiser is called Yoga Stops Yulin because I think and I believe that through the practice of yoga, we're cultivating peace and love, and we're sending it out in the world, and we're gathering more supporters for these dogs that really, really need it. And so, anyone here ever heard about the Yulin Dog Meat Festival? What have you heard?
They have this big festivals in China.
Yes.
Where they keep dogs for long periods of time, horrible conditions, and slaughter them. Yeah.
Yes, it's about that, I don't know if you or more people in this room heard about the festival, probably Sarah. So the Yulin Dog Meat Festival is how I heard about this dog-cat meat trade. And it was back in 2018. And I was not an animal rights activist back then. I was, just like a regular person, not even on social media. But I kept hearing this, Yulin festival because it happens to be that around 2014, 2015, a slew of images hit the internet and the world over got to learn about this issue that was happening in the south of China in a city called Yulin. And it's a city that's really devoid of any interest. And so what the whole, reason why this festival began, it's not an old ancient tradition, the festival. It really dates back to 2010. And it was started by dog meat butchers and traders in that region because the dog meat sales were waning and they thought, let's make a festival out of it. And we'll be able to bring in some tourists from other parts of China. And it happens to be that it worked. It was very successful because even foreign tourists from Europe, from different parts of the world would gather and go there to taste dog meat because it's something that you don't really have access over here in North America and other parts in other countries, of course. And so it became a thing. And I researched and I saw on the internet some images that were truly shocking and traumatizing. And, dogs being boiled alive, you would hear their screams of agony, and people would just laugh, you know? And I thought, why are they doing this to dogs? Like, it's not the question that they were eating them, it's a question that they were almost taking pleasure out of torturing them. And so I was puzzled and I had to learn more. And so I researched and I discovered that it's not just a Yulin once a year festival. It's really a widespread issue. It's mostly in Asia Pacific and of course China, but there are other countries like Vietnam, the Philippines. Although it was banned in 1999, it's still kind of happening under the radar, if you will. It happens in Cambodia. It happens in Indonesia, all parts of Indonesia. It happens in South Korea, where our beautiful guests today are from, Dora and Didi. They're mother and daughter, so we'll be able to take a closer look at them after my talk. We're talking about their mom, their proud mom, 6 years, about 6 years. And so I want to just go through a little bit of what I learned, because it's important that if we want to make change happen, especially in those countries, that we understand where the problem is, like why are they doing this and what are the dynamics and how we can best from over here help the dogs over there. And so looking for information, I quickly saw that there was a lot of misconceptions on the internet, you know, like people were saying contradictory things. And I was hungry for information. I wanted to know accurate facts. And so I started looking for a podcast on the topic, because there's a podcast on anything, like almost every subject. But strangely enough, there was nothing on this issue. So I started the first podcast on the dog cat trade. I started it in October of 2019. And since then, I've interviewed about 60 people. They're leaders of nonprofits, foreign NGOs working in those countries, trying to rescue dogs, trying to enact legislative changes where possible, working with lawyers, working with different politicians, government, leaders in those countries. And I've learned a lot. What I've learned is that although, we find this very horrifying, the idea of eating dogs, it's, dates back to many, many years ago. Like China would eat dogs because they lived through extreme poverty. China was extremely poor. They lived through some horrible famines. And obviously post-war, many countries would take to eating dogs and cats. They would eat just about anything for survival. And so this is not what the issue is. We're not talking about dogs, consumption for survival. We're talking about a trade that is a modern day invention. As one of my guests, Dr. Peter J. Lee, who is a China policy specialist for Humane Society International. He's a PhD professor who teaches at University of Houston in Texas. He was on my podcast and he told me that dog cat trade is a modern invention. It has nothing to do with, tradition. In fact, he said that, he being native Chinese, grew up in China, and he said typical Chinese food is not dog meat. It's, you'll see fish, you open a fridge and a refrigerator in China, you'll find fish, pork, eggs, vegetables, different stuff like that, rice, of course, but you won't find dog meat for the most part. So, why do we have such a huge problem if it's not part of their tradition? It's because China being a communist regime, at one point, the CCP, they wanted to grow and expand, and they have. Their economy has taken on a boom like about 50, 60 years ago. And now they went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to being the second world super economy. And many are predicting that within a decade, they're going to become the super economy of the world, outstaging the US, right? So he said that they wanted to develop their country, they would encourage their citizens to open businesses, to make money, and to be independent, And so a lot of the rural areas of China, where there's a lot of poverty, people have limited education and means, they saw this as a way to earn a living because dogs are routinely kidnapped, dognapped, I should say, from people's homes. So pets stolen routinely for their meat. Strays, obviously, there's no spay and neuter programs that are funded in China and many of those countries. And so there's an overpopulation of strays. So I'll just take a bit of water. So there's an overpopulation of strays. And so it's easy money. Your cost is zero. You bring it to a dog butcher, you get $50. It's good business for them. And with the international outrage that this created when the images were released all over the net, and I will say the images came from Chinese activists. A lot of people think it's foreigners that kind of intervened and came into the country trying to say, police what they were doing. But it's really Chinese activists that are as outraged as we are that this is happening. They are ashamed. They feel it's completely wrong, and like us. And I would say 20% only of the Chinese population eats dog meat regularly. And it's mostly older men. So the older generation of men in China, they have this mythical belief that surrounding dog meat in particular, that dog meat will bring them virtuous, benefits like increase their virility, keep them cool during hot summer days, and somehow keep them warm during cold winter days, and also this preposterous stuff. But it's been kind of fed through the dog meat traders that want people to eat dog meat because that's what they are doing. That's what they're selling, and they want to make money. So they keep, propagating all this, propaganda about dog meat, that it's virtuous, it's going to help heal you, elevate your chi, anything to sell. So that's what it's about. It's really not like, cultural opposition, because that's one of the arguments that we hear a lot is that it's their culture. Why should we judge them? And I would agree with that normally if it was just a question of they were eating dogs on top of the other animals that they eat, because we're guilty of the same thing. Everywhere in the world, we have animal agriculture. We have, chickens, pigs, cows that are routinely killed and live in horrifying conditions. Even here in Canada, we often think that we have some great farms and, farming practices, but it's really horrifying when you take a look. So it's not about that. It's not being, against these countries. It's really about the trade, the cruelty that comes with it. Because the traders and the butchers, they're really more like mafia-like families, and they control the dog meat trade in all of China, different parts of China. So it's a segment of the population. It definitely does not represent the whole of China, because if I invite you all to look at the website, yogastopsyulin.com, I started this website this year, and it has a lot of information. You'll see there's a page on dog cat meat trade, and it goes by country, what the problematics are, the differences. China versus Vietnam, for example. Vietnam is cat meat trade, like the cat meat mecca of the world is what we call it, because cat meat is sought, and it's not just their meat. It's they make something called goyang soju, which is a cat elixir, and it's touted towards middle-aged women to say that it will help them, prevent arthritic pain. It's a youth elixir, and it's very, very popular in Vietnam. And Vietnam also has some horrible practices around dog meat. The dogs are often illegally smuggled through the Thai border, because I say illegally because Thailand, in 2017, they managed to ban and outlaw the dog cat meat trade. And this was thanks in most part to Soy Dog Foundation, which is an amazing foundation based in Phuket, Thailand. And it's headed by two expatriates, John Daly and his late wife, Jill Daly, who got there in Thailand for their honeymoon in 2003. And they saw there was a huge problem of overpopulation of strays. And they decided to quit their jobs early, take an early retirement, and set up shop in Thailand. And they were amazing because they created free spay and neuter clinics. They told me at the beginning when they got there was 650,000 dogs in Bangkok alone. It's huge, of strays. And so they brought down that overpopulation of dogs like hugely. And they fought to ban this horrific trade, and they managed. In 2017, it's mostly banned. Obviously, the king was a dog lover, so they got lucky with that. But so in Vietnam, dogs often come through the Thai border, and they are loaded onto trucks. And often there are like 1,000 dogs in little wire cages onto these trucks with a cover, so they are suffocating of heat. Often their limbs are broken just to fit as many dogs as possible in a wire cage. We're talking about chicken wire cage. No dog should fit in there technically. And it's really, really horrific. So yeah, that's what happens in Vietnam. Also, that's really disturbing is they have a practice there where they force feed the dogs with a feeding tube. It's a bit like foie gras. It's a cage with foie gras. And it's not uncommon for them to force feed rocks. Because why? Because the heavier the dog is at the sell point, the more money they will get. And so the dogs, it's not, obviously the dogs with stomach lining is often just, explodes and the dog dies a terrible death. And so it's very, 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 very horrible. Also, dogs and the meat trade all over. And we talk about Indonesia, the common practice because they're afraid of dogs, right? Dogs can defend themselves. They have claws, so they hog tie them, their paws together, and often it dislocates a rotator cuff. And if anyone of you has practiced yoga and has a rotator cuff injury, you know how painful that is. And so not just that, they're for days. So they're like this, and their muzzles are tied. They can't a dog in order to pull down, they can't, but they can't pant. So they often die on the way over there. And I think that might be lucky for them because what awaits them is truly horrific. So all this to say, we have a big problem, but I don't want to give the idea that there's no hope because if there was no hope, I wouldn't be doing this. Obviously, it would be a waste of time and I would just cry in a corner and say, God help. But there's stuff that we can do. And some organizations like For Cause International that were on my podcast, you can see those episodes with Dr. Kathy Pollitt. At the time, she was head of the stray animal unit in Southeast Asia. And she's the one who told me all sorts of things that happen in those countries. For example, in Vietnam, there's a Greyhound bus. So the dog meat traders routinely used a Greyhound bus, the loading carriage underneath the bus where all the gas fumes are. They put the dogs in there and they travel for days. So the dogs are screaming. And they went on, that For Cause International put their staff on the bus to see, what are people's reaction? Is this actually happening? And no one says anything. And you can hear the screams of the dogs, but no, it's like everyday business, no one says anything. So when you work in a country like that, well, it's thanks to organizations like Soy Dog Foundation that have outlawed the dog cat meat trade in Thailand. And For Cause International had a great victory in Cambodia. Siem Reap, which is a big province and a big dog meat trade province, big markets, slaughterhouses, they were able to ban the dog cat we trained. That was in 2020. And then we had a city in Vietnam called Oha, who's a very touristic area. And although, you know, we say it's a victory because it is, you know, everyone that makes that decision to ban dog, kitten, cat meat is a great victory, but it was never a big mecca of dog meat to begin with. But still, like, you know, organizations are making headway. And the solutions, what are they? And that was my main point of starting the podcast. I absolutely wanted to know what I can do that would actually make a difference. And so I would see people sign petitions left and right, and I would ask my guests on the podcast, like, does this help? Like, is this making an impact? And most of my guests have said no. Like, it really doesn't help, especially a petition signed by foreigners to a country like China. Forget about it. Like, they don't care. They will not care to, you know, Western bourgeoisie ideologies, you know, it's all lost on them. And actually, it kind of backfires because it makes them want to continue this even more. Instead of being policed by a Westerner, they're like, you're not going to tell us how to, you know, run our country. And so this is, you know, like I wanted to leave you with some hope. So if you want, you can go on the website, you can find out all these great organizations, and mostly our beautiful Chinese rescuers that I'm featuring. I wanted this event to come and directly help the Chinese rescuers that I've come to know through my podcast, because truly I will say that the most compassionate people I've met so far are Chinese. They are some of the most devoted rescuers that you could ever meet. You know, they will go to extreme lengths to continue to save these dogs. And in fact, one of my Chinese rescuers that I'm featuring and that we're donating, raising funds for tonight is called Shita. That's her nickname, but her real name is Li Han. And she's based out of Wuhan, China. Yes, where COVID-19 comes from. It's central China, and she says it's really akin to the Midwest in the States, like a very redneck type of mentality. No animal lovers there per se. And so she saw a great need in rescuing these dogs that she finds in horrific states. You know, like some dogs are, you know, she basically tries not to pay for the dog because that will only fuel the trade, because we're giving them exactly what they want. The traders, they want money. But it's very, very hard. In China especially, I've come to understand that, you know, for the most part, it's hard to rescue a dog because there's no law. There's no animal welfare law in China to this day in 2022, which is very sad. And it's been proposed since 2009. Lawyers in China, you know, they work with government officials and they try to, you know, propose animal welfare laws every year since 2009. And every year, the CCP puts it at the back burner. It's not a priority for them because they are just hungry for power and money and dominance. You know, this is what they focus on. And so animal welfare laws are not a priority for that. But, you know, the day will come. And I've spoken to also Yiping Lane, who's another Chinese rescuer that's featured on the website that I released a podcast last Friday, June 24th. And she says the same thing. She's very hopeful because there's such good people in China that are against this, and that eventually we'll get the younger generations in those positions in government and, you know, with more progressive views, and we'll get to a point where China will have animal protection laws. So I guess I will now introduce our special guest, Dora and Didi, who's accompanied by her mom, Claudie. And maybe I can kind of bring it a little bit closer so we can see the beautiful dog. And I would like to tell us a little bit about their story, how to treat their dog. Take the mic. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. Yes. So, as Jay mentioned,
for most of us who are against dog meat trade or dog and cat meat trade, it started mostly by realizing there was a festival called Yulin, and Radio Canada a few years ago just gave it a 15-second spot, and that was it for me. I never heard of dog and cat meat trade before, and I started taking in information from the internet and lost myself because the images are unbearable. That is hell on earth for animals. So along the way, I discovered that South Korea was the only country in the world where it is administered. They have 17,000 farms, small ones, bigger ones, and so-called the country of the calm morning ceased to be calm. As you could hear the dogs screaming everywhere. And as Jake said, it's not so much that they eat dogs and cats, because they've been doing that for centuries. It's the way now they put them to death because of these superstitions that an animal being tortured will develop a more adrenaline and give medicinal virtues for those who eat tortured animals. So what could I do in my new home? Well, I thought that instead of just trying, I would try to do my part. So I heard of this place called Safe for Dogs. She's Nami's teacher, Nami Kim, and she used to be a teacher. And when she retired, she opened this refuge and started also with taking in the dogs, trying to convert the little farms into something else, like buying the dogs, telling people with that money you can start something else, herbs, plants, be creative, don't be destructive. And so she started an adoption program. She's having England, Australia, I think, United States, and Canada. She places dogs in good families. Happen to be one. And Didi and Dora have been with me for almost 6 years now. I've learned from them, although they are so shy, I've learned that trust, you have to deserve it. And they speak their own language, they'll always be shy. Animals have a huge memory. They remember stuff, and just touching their paws is awful for them because they've seen things that no one should see, and they've seen dogs being slaughtered in front of them. And Nami Kim told me, you don't really look into the eyes of a dog because he believes he's the next one on the list while you're looking at him. So it took a while before they trusted me. Well, they climbed the stairs. That was amazing. Yeah. And they are so gentle. You'll never see them acting fierce with a human being. They even go along with most of the dogs. They never bark when we walk twice a day. So yeah, they've given me some peace of mind, although I know dog meat trade is still going on. I know also Nami Kim in South Korea is working with the president. He's a lawyer. I think if there's someone who can help a little bit downsize the trade sale. But as you said, it's marketing. These people are even manifesting. Yeah,
or trying to sell the virtual
Yeah,
dog.
they go in the streets, the traders and the butchers, they go into the streets and say, we have a right to make a living with our trade. And this is a special trade because it takes experience to know how to torture a dog. So, yeah, they give me some peace of mind, and I wish I could do more. But just the fact that whenever I meet someone on the street, they ask, "Oh, what kind of dogs are they?" Georgian dogs, they come from South Korea, and I explain to them that when you buy from South Korea, you also buy the bad stuff that comes with it. So buying and exporting. So I started boycotting the Chinese products, South Korean products.
Not obvious to do.
Not obvious to do. I've written so many letters, so many people. I even wrote to the president, CEO of Apple, because they have factories in China. And I've been writing 6 months in a row, telling him stories about the dog and cat meat trade, because maybe, you never know who has an idea of how to stop this horrific trade. But the important thing is that being aware is having some power to change things. So I thank my dogs for what they taught me.
And their mother-in-law.
Yeah, mother and daughter.
Is that?
Yeah, that's Didi. And she's stronger, although she's seen more horrific stuff. The daughter, she was born and fed with garbage. So she's weaker. She's had her 2 knees replaced already. So they live a terrible life. And
what's what I wanted to mention is that in South Korea, the compost bins that we use, it's like garbage waste, like food waste. This is what they feed the dogs in South Korea because it's cheap. Like the city bins come to the farm, and the farmer just mixes it with a little bit of water, makes a sludge, and gives that to the dogs. And the dogs live in elevated wire cages. Yeah. So their paws are up in the floor because they have no floor to rest. And their feces piled up. Yeah, so it stinks like you have no idea. You approach a dog on the farm, you can smell it miles and miles away. And to think that their sense of scent is so much stronger than us, you cannot imagine how horrific it is to live in this condition. They're exposed to the elements 365 days a year, to the extreme colds, because it gets minus 40 over there, to extreme hot temperatures. They have no rest, and they're slaughtered at age 9 months in general, because that's when they reach their full size. But if they make it back, far, because often you find dead frozen dogs on farms all the time.
They keep the females most of the time so we can produce more babies. It's a cheap operation if you think about it.
Minimal costs.
Yeah,
maximum profits.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Lindsay.
My pleasure. And I'm sure they'll remember today.
Oh, yes, I heard famous. So, other things I really do to help is you can donate, obviously. We encourage donations. There's a donation jar in the corner there. You can also donate on the website. You'll see all the links that our Chinese rescuers can, read up about them. I encourage donations to FITA because I'm partial. I started a page for her to try to promote what she does, and it's called Wild Risk Society. Wow, because it's Woodford's of Wuhan. That's where she's based out of. So donations, of course, are indispensable because they can't do any of this work without donations. But you can also sponsor a dog, you can adopt a dog, you can volunteer. I volunteer for Humane Society International. They have an emergency shelter here in Montreal. So you can do all sorts of things. And so just can't give up, and certainly for these beautiful babies, cannot give up. Do not give up our hope. And thank you all for coming. This is, your presence is truly appreciated. A lot of people since pandemic, they commit to doing something and then they back out of it. So I really am so grateful for all of you for coming, and let's rally together and make change happen. Thank you.